Hi, I'm Nick Capone, and this is Cultural Catholicism, an exploration into the existence and significance of the Catholic faith within the culture. Today, I'm speaking with Dave Durand. He is a business leader, speaker, author. He has founded, led, and sold multiple companies, ranging from startups to nine-figure enterprises. He's chairman of Best Version Media, which is North America's largest magazine publisher, and he's author of 6 books, including one of his most recent, Leading Giants, which was a #1 release on Amazon in leadership. Today, we talk about a lot of great things. I feel like I say that every time. Uh, we cover his new studio that he's got, and it's something. I've never seen anything like it. We talk about the rarity of business leaders integrating Catholic virtue within the world of business and professional careers. Um, and he talks about why that is, and how we can hear more of it. Um, we cover his personal journey, how he got to this place of being able to balance his faith and his professional success. We review some of the core aspects of sort of everything he does. He really talks about the cardinal virtues and the transcendentals. And if you don't know what those are, we'll get into them. He talks about those, goes through them, and how they can be integrated into life, really, in general. He gives some advice for aspiring Catholic professionals on how they can integrate said virtues and transcendentals. And then he gives a sneak peek at the end of a new app he'll be releasing soon, which will help you to know yourself better than ever before in order to achieve true success. So, as I said, it's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And here we are. Dave Durand, thank you for being with me today. I know your time's valuable. I don't take this for granted.
Happy to be with you, Nick. This is great. It's a very good use of time.
So I have to comment before we actually get started. Started is your studio, which I can tell by your now iconic, I think, neon lights behind you. When I
Yes.
was there, I've been to your studio once,
hmm
and one of the most impressive and overwhelming places I've ever been. When I walked in at the time, there was a beautiful small sports car right in the entrance.
Yeah.
You walk through the door, you go to where you're at now, which was like part podcast studio, part seminar room, part almost movie theater. You go
Yeah.
up, you've got your production studio, you had a meeting room. You go through to the other side, and you've got like a half basketball court, a mini bar, and a hangout area. I don't know if you could have fit anything else into that
Well,
studio.
should we tell them?
Yeah.
we actually we just expanded it by a couple thousand square feet more. We have now another I would call the Dragon Slayer Lounge, and then also a fitness center, full fitness center with MMA flooring, and full gym, sauna, and another like kitchenette over there too. So Nick, you're gonna have to come by and see that as well.
I literally did not think you could fit more in, and so the answer is to just make it bigger.
That's well, you know what? We do a lot of events. We host a lot of people. So and I'm just talking about my family. No, we host a lot of events. We got a lot of people here.
So when I first met you, it was on the set of the recording of your Pursuit of Wisdom, sort of a masterclass course,
hmm
produced by Ave Maria University. And in that, I discovered your implementation of the virtues, the cardinal virtues, within business and leadership. Um, that I might just be ignorant. I've not heard that from anybody else who's at the level of success that you're at. And so my question is, am I right in in stating that that's rare, or are other people doing this? Because to me, you seem like a bit of a trailblazer in the way that you're actually bringing it to fruition. But you tell me.
Well, that's a good question. So, as a CEO, like a functioning operating CEO, I mean, there's philosophers and theologians and some consultants that will make reference to these sorts of things. But, as a business builder and entrepreneur, it is not common for people to use the language. But to their credit, whether they're using the language or not, when they're doing things that work, they're actually practicing these principles. But oftentimes they're doing it haphazardly. So I'm trying to help people understand it, define it, package it, corral, and use it a little bit more intentionally and effectively, which is important. And where they're going wrong, they're not using these principles. So if you walk into somebody and you say, hey, listen, you know what's going to make your business great is the four cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. Oh, and on top of that, if you want to build a great culture, all things that are going to go well for you are harnessing the transcendentals of goodness, truth, unity, and beauty. They're going to say, brother, I don't know what you just said to me. And that would be understandable. But when you break it down, we have kind of like classic American terms for these things. Like words never said, Nick. What I loved about working there is nobody can make a decision to save their lives. Okay. But they say the opposite. Well, that's prudence. Okay. It's wisdom, and it's the mastery of decision making. Nobody says I loved working there because they were unfair. Okay. Well, what are they saying? I want to work there because of fairness, justice. People, we say, hey, grit, the grind, stick to itiveness. Well, that's fortitude. I mean, not exactly. And it doesn't give you the function of them. So when you get into these things in a more formal way, like in the work that we do here at Leading Giants, what happens is you give people the playbook. And so they have access to these things in a way that if you just say, hey, Nick, you need to be, more motivated. You're like, okay, well, how? Well, we teach them how.
I think that, and also one thought I had too is how, of course, all these things by the world can be perverted and like pushed too far. So there's also a balance of implementing them appropriately.
So I love that you said that because I don't know if you studied Aristotle at all.
Not enough to say that I have.
This is an Aristotelian thing in ethics. Okay, one of his greatest works. He talks about how every single virtue has an excess or a deficit that makes it no longer a virtue. So if you have an appropriate amount of courage. Well, if you're a deficit in that, you'd have cowardice. Everybody understands that. But if you're like excessive, you'd have like this false bravery,
Right.
which is almost like almost an audaciousness. It's like to believe that you can walk up to a grizzly bear and punch it in the face. I mean, like you're literally in the face of something where you don't even recognize how stupid you are and that you're in danger, and that's really not courage. In fact, it's a funny thing. My son Kevin. Maybe you don't know my son Kevin Durand, but John Paul, I think. So I have two. Kevin graduates, and he's 32 years old. He graduated. He's a priest now. But when he was young, we were at the CN Tower in Toronto, which was the tallest freestanding building in the world at the time, and 115 stories up, if I remember correctly. There was this like platform where you step out on this glass. Okay. And my daughter was maybe 4 or 5 at the time that we took them there. And she just, jumped out there, wasn't thinking anything of it. And Kevin would not go. And he just had to get himself just built with courage to do that. And mostly, I think it was like a sibling competitiveness. If she's going to do that, I'm going to be ridiculed. I better get out there. But he exhibited what would be perceived as by anyone way more fear than she had. But in the end, that day, he's the only one that exhibited courage because she had no idea what was going on. She didn't even care. She just whimsically went out there and he had to overcome something. But an interesting thing, there's like a spectrum to this too. The classic saying kind of in these studies would be like the soldier that goes to war that's inexperienced would fight with courage. Okay. But the soldier that goes to war with experience would fight from courage. Why? Well, the inexperienced person has never built prudence, and that's an experiential thing. So they have to tap something from outside of them to go experience it. That's what Kevin did there. Whereas the actual person with fortitude or courage is going to operate from courage from within. So they are courageous. They're not needing to act or tap into courage at that time. And there's a big difference between the two. When you become, that's why we see people that are kind of low virtue, high vice have moments
Right.
of virtue. It's because they're acting with that virtue, but not from that virtue.
So, in looking at yourself, obviously living this out has served you well. And I was curious,
As well as, by the way, when I did not live it out, it did not serve me well.
well,
So just
y-
let's remember that as a sinner who goes to
well,
confession.
well,
So,
let's get into that. So, if you don't mind, can you share your journey? Can you share, how did you get into this world and how'd you get to where you're at now with the wisdom that you do?
well, so at the base root of all of this is prudence. Prudence is the charioteer of all virtues. The Catechism itself says that it is uh, it's the foundation with which all the other virtues are built upon. So without prudence, you can have the rest of them. Now, you can have, like I said, you can act with the other ones, or you could have what would be considered a subjective virtue, meaning like a person who they don't overeat, but maybe they're still having a difficult time with, you know, lust. Okay. So they have like a subjective way of applying it. Whereas the person who truly actually have it, it applies everywhere in their life. And that's something you build over time. Anyway, prudence itself is a practical wisdom. It's a practical knowledge, even. So it's not like the periodic table and memorizing that, okay? But it is like, I know what this is. I've been here before. I can kind of see what's about to happen, okay? And I'm aware of the circumstance. So you can only really gain it through experience. But the beauty of it is that if you don't actually have prudence, you can gain it rapidly by being around prudent people and listening to the way they think. And it accelerates learning at a rapid pace. So, what does that mean? It means I had great parents. And so, because I had great parents, I was able to learn these things without even knowing I was learning them. Just like language, certainly your parents are stopping and teaching you certain words. Please say it, please. Okay. But then after a while, they're not like teaching you every word. You're just sitting around hearing them and you're like, oh, okay, which is great, by the way, when you're a parent and you listen to your little kid throw out some fancy word you never knew they knew
That's where we're
before.
at. Yeah.
Also
Yeah, with my
cautious.
3-year-old.
Yeah. Cautious if they throw out one that they
Yeah,
shouldn't have said,
right.
by the way. But so there's things like that. And so I had good parents and good foundation in that regard. But then what happened was I was just really willing to try a lot. So I had a high level of openness to experience. So I started building businesses and hanging around people who built businesses and learning about entrepreneurship and learning about sales. I hated sales. I still do, never liked it, but I did it because I recognized, wait a second, nothing happens until somebody sells something. And that's actually the number one way to begin a business. Okay. So I learned those things. And then through doing something I didn't like, I learned another, by the way, fortitude is doing what you don't feel like doing. Okay. So all of a sudden, simultaneously, these things were happening for me. But then what happened, Nick, was an interesting thing. I had rapid success in a company that was built very much like a franchise. It was more independent contractor related, but it was very much like a franchise because the franchise owners had their own physical locations, their own rents, or if they owned something, they had their own employees, they did their own their advertising. Everything was just like that. And out of the almost 1,000 locations, mine was number one. And so this organization asked me to be their national training director in addition to what I was doing there. So I had a lot of people who would come in to see me, or I'd go to see them to watch how they trained their people to drive productivity. And I saw some really fascinating things there. Like, wow, same product, in essence, the same market, access to the same tools, the same training, the same everything. Yet this person gets incredible results and this person doesn't. And what's so nice about that is that you've kind of got a controlled test, right? And it's the trainer for the most part. There are other mild mitigating circumstances, mostly the trainer. So I was able to study that. And I didn't know, not being a researcher or a therapist or psychotherapist or a theologian or philosopher, what I was seeing, but I figured it out quickly. And in human nature, I started applying this and measuring it and reducing that or increasing that and noticing radical changes in performance by doing these certain things. And that's when I started to really learn, and I really didn't know the wording. It took me actually well over a decade to be able to recognize even the early onset of this wording. But it had to do with two things: personality, and within personality, the most powerful predictor of success was virtue. Now, most people would say it's going to be conscientiousness. If you do scientific studies on personality, there's something called the Big Five that scientists like to use. I use it too. To me, it's the most effective one we use in our programs. But there's a trait that we have called conscientiousness, and it's a leading indicator for success, career success across all professions. But what people fail to tell you is that if you have low conscientiousness naturally, almost like a temperamental thing, but you have high virtue, you will act conscientious. If you have all of these traits at optimal levels naturally, but vice within them, you can't actually optimize. And if you have virtue, you can make up for anything for the most part. You can't really actually make up for intellect, and you can't make up for creativity, a few other things, but you can tap the fullness of the intellect and creativity you have. And if most people are tapping only half of theirs, you're going to be ahead of them. And you also become smart enough to tap others.
So, where in your journey did you not live this out and you really felt it?
Well, many times over. I mean, the only way that you learn, first of all, within your own family, you learn these things just with your relationships. When you do the right thing, you say the right thing. When you say the wrong thing, when there was something you wish you'd have taken back, when you didn't think there was anything wrong with saying this particular thing, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, that was pretty catastrophic. Now I know, don't say that. Or another way that you learn them, and this is a big one, is on the receiving side of this. Like, I didn't like the way that felt. And then I noticed it there, and then I noticed it there. And by the way, this is not from a perspective of woe is me thing, because everybody experiences those. There's not a single person on earth who doesn't experience betrayal and hurt and bad comments. The question is, what are you doing with it? So I always immediately forgave anything. God just kind of made me that way. I can't take credit for it. It's easy for me to forgive. But what he gave me this grace to do was to analyze it and to say, well, there's a pattern. Huh, do I do that? And then you're reflective that way. You say, do I do that pattern? Because I don't like the way that felt. And then you're like, well, I think I might have done that. Or to what degree? So you start to analyze these things almost from the perspective of the golden rule. And you don't isolate them now. You say to yourself, okay, with my family, am I acting the way that I expect them to act? Am I acting with them the way that I expect my team at work to act? And am I treating my team, even though there's a priority of order, obviously, your family coming first, right? But am I treating my team in a way that I expect my family to treat me and me to expect my family in the same way that, like, if my family watched me with my team, would they think this is the same guy? And vice versa. And you start to connect these things, and you connect them everywhere. So my earliest writings that I had, the first book that I ever wrote was called Perpetual Motivation. And I worked on these topics for years, but I wrote it before I was 30. I think it was 27. I don't remember. But the book was about how we have like 6 main priorities in life. People who are ultimately successful: their faith, their family, their finances, their physical health, their social contributions, and their continued education. Friendships are within that, very, very important within the family realm. But if a person neglects any one of these things, it can knock the rest of them down like dominoes. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to act in a particular way around my family and my company and the people that I work with, I probably should take care of my body that same way, like with the same standard. And I should probably be responsible financially the same way with the same standard. And my goodness, to have all of those things and not to have that same standard with God doesn't make any sense at all. And I did not know what I was talking about to myself and even with others I was teaching about the topic, because I wasn't using the words. Just like our opening, we said, well, what are other CEOs doing? So, well, they're haphazardly doing the things I'm talking about. I was doing that. But it all came back to virtue. That's really what it was: to be prudent with your family, to be just with your family, to have fortitude with your family, and to have temperance with your family. And how all of that spills into every other part of your life. So instead of saying, so there's there's a lot of things that scientists will tell you do not translate. Like, for example, they'll say, just because you learn one skill doesn't mean you can learn another skill. And there's some pretty interesting science about that. But so there are exceptions. Like, for example, if you learn like 5 foreign languages and you've learned all the Latin languages, it's going to be easier to learn another one because you understand kind of that order
Right.
of things. But that's a foundation of amount of learning that is stacked upon, as opposed to if you learn English and then Chinese, there's not going to be much of a translation there. So it's like starting over again. It's not like, well, languages come natural, so I can just learn Chinese. But there's a difference, though. The difference is if you step outside of that and you say, well, what about the virtue of learning? Okay. Prudence, which is mastering decision making. How are you going to go about learning? Justice, when are you going to go about learning and for what reason? Fortitude, staying with it. Temperance, staying with it too, but in a different way. Fortitude is the moving forward, temperance is the resisting of. But then, in addition to that, too, like, well, if I'm going to learn about this, how do you learn to be an expert? So I started studying expertise and teaching people how to become an expert at anything. So it doesn't matter if you can learn the skill of learning by way of expertise. That actually you can do. And it's repetition, frequency, intensity, and purpose. If you apply those things to whatever you're doing, you're going to accelerate the learning. But the only way that you can actually apply repetition, frequency, intensity, and purpose is with the virtues. So it's like a big game of like, you know, ping pong with 15 different paddles and how all these things fit. And it's pretty awesome when you can harness it and center it and bring it down to something.
Well, speaking of conscientiousness, okay, so at what point did it click for you where you're like, these are the these are the words, the actual names of these things that I've been sort of teaching? Like, when was that? Was there a moment where, you realized, oh, this is a connection to the faith, or what was that like?
Well, decades ago, I was introduced to the idea of the temperaments. Okay. And I mean, it's probably 30 some years ago. And the first time it was, I don't know if it was Myers-Briggs or LIFO or these, Taylor systems, Smalley systems. There's all these different types of things, where, you're ENTJ or you're more of a beaver or a golden retriever or whatever it is. There's many different things. And what I realize is that with all of these different 16 different personality types, whether people broke it down to 16 or 4 or whatever, they all came back to the temperaments that basically have been in existence for years: choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. But the more I dove into this, the more I recognized that while I found those useful, by the way, because almost everybody who takes that test goes, wow, that really is me. And that wouldn't be valid if they were all totally complementary. I'm an amazing person. I'm an amazing person, good looking, amazing, and intelligent. Wow, they've described me perfectly. But many of them are pretty bad. In every one of them, there's like a pretty downside to each one of them. So for a person to go, that's me, downside and good side, that there's a lot of truth in them, but they're not quite scientific. So the scientific community has actually developed, there's many different personality traits, and personality is more than just temperament. So temperament is a natural inclination we'll always go back to. But there are 5 big traits, and those big traits are you can remember by thinking of the word ocean. Openness to experience, which is also kind of considered an intelligence of sorts, but openness to experience. Conscientiousness, which is dutifulness, hard work. That's why it's it's got a predictability factor when it comes to overall success. As openness, by the way, does for many different things too. An unregulated open person has a tendency to be on the political spectrum very, very, very far to the left. Like, if you've got an idea, they'll take it.
It makes sense.
Give the man a trophy for running track against women.
A brain
Yes, all in openness because I have no sense of reality.
so open
Okay.
that their brain falls out.
Oh, they're so open that they have no sense of reality. But on the other side of things, way far to the right, though, is a person that's so rigidly closed-minded that they find themselves to be God in and of themselves. So by the way, I am naturally very open. When I take my test comes out like I'd have been like I'd be very far left politically, and I am not at all. And there's a reason I'm not. Virtue. It's the thing that pulls you back to center. Okay. But then there's conscientiousness. Then there's agreeability. Agreeability is great. I mean, people that are highly agreeable are very giving. They care about others, oftentimes more than themselves. But interestingly enough, if you're too high on agreeability, your success factor in a lot of businesses and a lot of professions, you need to be a little lower on agreeability. And the reason for it is because people are super hyper agreeable, don't stand for any, they have a hard time standing up for themselves and they get run over pretty easily. But if you are highly agreeable, you need virtue to regulate it. Just like if you have less conscientiousness. And then the last one is two titles. They're the same thing: neuroticism or emotional stability. Neuroticism is kind of where you say it almost negatively because almost everybody looks at neuroticism on the downside of it. And then there's emotional stability. That's the same title. Oh, and I think I forgot because I didn't go in order with ocean. So openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion. A lot of people say, well, isn't that introversion and extroversion? Not really. It's more like, to what degree are you extroverted? Okay. Inversely, you could say introverted, but that's not really how it works. Agreeability and then neuroticism. And so all these things are important. And the neuroticism is the one where you don't want to score high at all because you've got like depression, anxiety, a lot of difficult things happening in your life. So you want to have more of a stability, a lower mark on that one.
This is just a side note of curiosity. Looking at agreeableness, is that in? Do you know if that's in relation to like being high in trait empathy or anything like that?
It
Because
is. It's
if
very high in trait
yeah,
empathy.
okay.
And that is a very good part of it. I mean, the classic empath is highly agreeable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think I'm wondering for self discovery because I
Yeah.
I I seem to be very empathetic. Um,
Yeah.
and yet when I say to my wife that I guess that means I'm high in agreeableness, she's like, "No, not
No,
not
no, you're not.
not the guy I
By the
am
way,
married
when
to."
you say, I think I'm high and agreeable in this, and she says, no, you're not, you know that she's not.
I'm gonna remember
Right,
that one for
I
next
think,
time.
by the way, that is a really good social experiment between two people right there. You've just discovered it.
Oh boy,
Um,
the
but
neuroticism will grow.
interesting thing, Nick, though, is most of us are relatively bad self judges of these things. To do a self test is important because you have to have self awareness. But usually, if our wife or kids or neighbors or friends and coworkers are going to say, "Nick, brother, you're not agreeable," okay, they're probably more right than we are. Um, but there's also contextual things. So my scores are interesting. I'm very high in openness, very high in conscientiousness. I'm higher in agreeability than you would expect that I would to have career success. I'm right down the center in extroversion, which most people are surprised by because I'm in front of cameras, in front of audiences, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm right down the middle. And then in neuroticism, I'm very low, which is good. So that emotional stability is necessary for people to not see different patterns in you. But do you know who had the perfect personality?
Christ.
Yes, he did. And you know what he did? He ate with sinners.
Hmm.
He turned over the tables.
Hmm.
He is the word in the Bible, which said there is a time to kill and there's a time to sow, there's a time to reap, all the things there's a time for. Okay. He cried for Lazarus. He, enjoyed the wedding feast at Cana. He had every different thing you see. So if you were around Jesus just when you turned over the tables and called people a brood of vipers, you'd be like, angry man. No, that's where you saw him. Why? Because that was appropriate to the circumstance. It needed to be done there. Okay. So that looks like not agreeable, but it had to be done at that moment. And that's virtue. And I actually have never even thought about whether or not Jesus had virtue. I think he must have had virtue. Um, he's God. So I'm just like thinking to myself, does virtue apply to God? I think does. To his humanity would have had to have applied. That's an interesting thing. We got to get the theologians on the show. I've never even had the thought until now.
Is water wet?
But
It seems similar.
yeah, right. Water went. But I think he must have had to have had virtue to function as he did function. But he was perfect in the way he applied all of his virtues. He was perfectly virtuous, I bet would be the way to word it. Because he's perfectly virtuous, that's why I wonder, like, how much of that was virtue, But he had the
Mm.
temptation. He had the temptation in the desert, which means that he needed virtue to overcome the temptation. I just was working that out with you, Nick, if you don't mind here.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's yeah.
But on personality, though, he displayed all these things. If you'd have seen him crying for Lazarus, you might be like, gosh, get a hold of yourself. No, why? It was appropriate to the moment, to the circumstance. So every single one of these things that he did perfectly. So you might have people in your life that are like, Nick is not agreeable, even though you're actually very agreeable. But it was the situation. Why? Because your virtue said, this is a time not to agree. There is something not right. There's no justice in this. I will fight this fight. I don't care what I have to do here. So it's like you see it's almost like the in the animal kingdom, the docile mom that's taking care of it. Now somebody comes by and that docile mom kills. Like I will not let anything threaten my cubs, right? So that's innate in an animal, but for a human being, it's like it's a virtue that takes place.
And when you're talking about Christ too, I think that's probably, I think it's fair to say everybody who um, interacted with him was struck by him.
Yes.
And it is probably, I mean, he lived, it is that perfection of, yeah, in every situation he was acting perfectly.
Yeah.
This is an immeasurably obvious statement, but I'm just imagining it as you're saying it. Um, yeah, well, what would Jesus do is a popular phrase for a reason.
It is. Well, you know what's cool about that? So we work with what our program really is personality optimization. Okay. So Nick, if you think about pretty much anybody in your life, you keep them nameless, but you would probably say, and there may be some people in your life who are like, I would not want them to change a thing. My wife is that way. And the reason for it, by the way, is because she knows her flaws. And because she's aware of her flaws, I never ever feel the need to be like, hey, you've got a flaw, you need to work on it. And frankly speaking, she has very few at all. I couldn't even name one, but I know she knows what they are, and she always works toward those things. So I just sit here in peace all the time, knowing that I've got this virtuous wife, and that's the most important thing: is to marry a virtuous woman. Well, um, when it comes to these sorts of things, though, if you look at pretty much everybody in life, you'd say they're great, but I just wish they were a little bit more. Okay, or they're great, but I just wish they were a little bit less. And about ourselves, if we're honest, we have to be able to say that. I mean, the person you shouldn't be around is the person who thinks they can't complete that sentence. But if you're going to say, well, I know I've got it okay, but I wish I was a little bit more, or I wish I was a little bit less. Now I've got to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's personality optimization. But even when you optimize your personality, it doesn't change who you are by way of many things. There are a lot of things outside of personality, physical traits, for example, but also intelligence can be kind of registered within the traits of personality, but it's not really personality, and neither is motivation, but neither is style and taste or approach. So if you were to take Chris Stapleton and Beyonce and optimize both of their personalities, not certain how possible that is, but let's say, although Chris I don't know, whatever. If you could optimize their personalities, which they could, okay, they would still remain very different people. Okay, so like humor is going to be a little bit different, all those different types of things. So we don't like lose our personhood when we optimize our personality. So the experience with people is still very different, but you don't walk away going, it was great being with so and so. I just wish they didn't talk so much. Or it's great being with so and so, but I just couldn't get them to say anything. I just couldn't connect. There's a range too. It's not like they have to say 437 words in a certain number of minutes for them to be optimal. It's like, no, there's a range of optimal there, but they're in it. And that's what we need to strive to do with our personalities.
Um, Maybe towards the end, I'd like to hear more about actually what you are doing in your program in more in full.
Mhm.
But I'd like to focus on your faith now. And I think it's safe to say normally when success increases, faith decreases. I think that's, Christ said that, harder for the rich man to get into heaven than
Mhm.
camel to get through the eye of the needle. So obviously that, I don't, doesn't seem to be the case for you. I mean, I know that you attend mass daily, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and your son, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, is a
Yeah.
priest. So you're doing pretty good. Um, how is that? How have
Well,
you
I mean,
grown or maintained your faith despite this level of success that you've reached?
so I always want to say this when said, because like a lot of times people want to describe themselves to the interview as a devout Catholic or faithful Catholic. I definitely strive every day to be both of those things. but that's a high watermark right there. That's a very, very, very high mark. So if somebody to say, am I a striving devout, striving faithful Catholic? Yes, I am. I take that very seriously. I take it very seriously every single day. But I rely on God's mercy for that scorecard, which is going to be an important thing. Okay. So, but yes, I do take this seriously. And I can tell you that as the years have progressed in my life, my faith has deepened and deepened and deepened. These are grace things. There's some of this you can take credit for and some of you can't. I can take credit for all of them. Actually, let me put it this way, and this is absolutely theologically accurate. I can take credit for every single thing that I have done wrong fully. And I cannot take credit for everything that I've done right, with the exception of how I participated with God's grace. There was a participation, and it is not a glorification of God to pretend that that participation is not real, right? Because he made us to participate with his grace, and it is a glorification of him further that we would participate, that he would make a creature that would recognize that sort of thing. But his role is bigger than my role. I just only have mine to play. Okay. So, that being said, when I was young, I was given a grace where I went to mass every day through grade school. And even when I was, I think, in fourth grade, the school stopped that. So it was like once a week, but I just ended up still going every day. And they gave me a pass and they let me miss. Then I got to high school and girls were too cute and that became less important to me. And I kind of went wayward. But then I remember though, those prayers, they did not go away in my life because when they reignited after I was married, I I re-engaged them and I became serious about my faith again when I was about 27. I went to mass every Sunday in between that whole process, but not as a good Catholic, as a cosmetic. I appeared Catholic, but I was really only hedging my bet against hell. I really didn't love Jesus or anything. And so it was important for me to regain that. But one of the things you said is interesting. You said that, the Bible says or Jesus says that it's easier for a rich man to get through the eye of a needle than, into heaven. I think we have to remember a couple of different things that it's money is not the problem; it's the love of money, and that being rich, uh, we cannot equate it to success. And I know what you mean, and I would also say that because I know how you're grounded, you would agree with me. So I'm not correcting you, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of pulling
Yep.
this
Yep.
out of the connotation denotation we used. My second grade teacher, who nobody will ever know outside of her neighborhood and the school that she's in when she passes away, was highly successful to me because of the way she taught. And I remember her today. Okay. Well, so is Donald Trump. Okay. But why or how? Now, Donald Trump is rich and she is not, but they're both successful. And I would say equally successful. If she'd have pursued real estate and politics, she'd have been as successful as she was not wired for that. So she literally couldn't have in the same way that, she couldn't have pursued professional football. She wasn't built that way. Um, but what she did pursue, she accomplished that same way. So that is success. So I think really what it is, if you start thinking about this, it is like recognition, it's power,
That's what I was gonna say.
yeah, and it is wealth. And when a person has recognition and they have power and they have wealth, they don't want to give that up. And when you take that dopamine, you want more of it. So I believe another grace that God gave me is while I had success most of my life, I have 9 kids and they didn't go to cheap schools and I helped them out a lot. I used to say I'm the poorest rich guy I've ever met because I was always earning a lot of money, but by the time I was done paying for, even private grade school and college, there was almost nothing to put even in retirement. I didn't become like very wealthy until I started building a couple of significant companies that eventually I mean, I was earning good money before I sold them, but when I sold them, then it became super wealth, and that wasn't beforehand. And I really believe that God, for me, waited for me to have that sort of wealth until I matured in virtue and in holiness, that I would not have been equipped to handle it when I was younger. And so he knew better than me. Uh, and that happens.
That's a huge point. I think I've heard so many people be like, if God would just help me make a little bit more money. I mean, heck, I've said this. We all have. Like, I'll
Mhm.
do good.
Yeah.
I'll be prudent with it, and I just doesn't he know I got bills to pay, and it's like the child asking for like
Yeah.
more candy. It's like he knows how we're going to use it and whether or not, what you do with small matters. If he can trust you with small matters, he'll trust you with big ones, and um not being ready or being ready for it.
Yeah.
Um yeah, that's really interesting.
Do you know what I like about that, Nick, though, is this. So here's what I would say to young guys that want to make more money. By the way, because they should. I mean, there are very few circumstances in life where a man should not say, I need to and want to make more money.
Right.
That is not an unrighteous statement because that kid who wants to be able to go to school, your wife, who may be very kind and patient and not saying much about it, probably deserves a new dress and maybe some flowers and stuff like that. There, it's life is expensive, and a man providing for their family is a beautiful thing for the family to see. Now, all all ideas like that can be taken too far. So I'm not trying to talk about opulence or anything like that at all. But I mean, you have to make a lot of money as a young man and to provide. And frankly speaking, if a man is motivated to make a lot of money, then his wife can stay home. She doesn't have to go to work. And I'm not saying that if a woman wants to work and that's a circumstance that fits for the life that they have, that there are not times for that. For goodness sakes, Joan of Arc went to war, and she's up on my wall right here. Thank you, Joan of Arc, Saint Joan of Arc. So, but most women are not called to lead a country into battle and win on the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
If they are, they'll go for it. But men are called to provide and get out there and freaking do it. And when I hear a guy saying, I'm praying to God, and then they have the revelation that you had that God wants to deliver that result to me in his timing because the timing might not be good for it now, that guy still acts like the timing is now. Like as soon as that guy folds and says, well, I'm going to wait for God to give me the wealth, he's done.
Yep.
And so it's like, you know what, God, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep pounding on that door like as effectively as I can. I'm going to pound on it and pound on it and pound on it in good faith. You know why that's so good? Because the attempt to make money, all things ordered, prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, honesty, goodness, all of those things related. If you're taking that approach to it, you become a better man. And so the very attempt to try to make the money is the thing that forms the character that prepares you for God to be willing to give you the money. Isn't that awesome? I mean, and that's one of the reasons that, like the laws that he put into not just the laws of nature, but natural law. And natural law isn't, entirely this, but there is a natural law component to effort and result. And it's not quite that cut and dry, but there's a related thing that we all know there. And so it's cool. And so I like the fact that you're like, yeah, I'm doing that. Keep doing it.
It's like you kind of touched on this too, but it can't be I want money with the end of having money. Always, what is
Mhm.
it? What is it for?
Yeah.
What are you making the money for? And that
Yeah.
is, this happened with my growing up with my parents, and I've experienced it now too. We always found, you know, essentially living paycheck to paycheck, like most Americans, frankly. And side note, even that is an immense blessing because there are people who don't have any
Right.
money in the world. Um, but whenever we need money, he sends it.
Hmm.
And I remember there was one instance where, through a s- certain means, I was given in a not insignificant amount of money, and I was like, oh, this is incredible. This thing came to fruition. I could do all these things with this money. And then I was like, no, the fact that I got that sum means it's gonna be needed somewhere. And like a week later, something popped up in life that ate up, like to the cent, all of that money.
Wow.
And what has it done? I've witnessed it in my parents, who have been incredible role models in living the faith, is that it just increases your trust,
It does.
and God, it's pretty evident that everything he sends you is for a purpose. It's never to
Yeah.
hoard it. And you can you can save up and you can invest it, but it's always, so that he can use it in some way. It's not ours.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's really that's great. I'd like to touch on your most recent book, which I have a copy here, and it's called Leading Giants. And I think it covers so much, a lot of what we're kind of talking about here. But before we kind of dive into a few aspects of it, I was wondering if you could kind of tell listeners what it is about.
Sure. There's a heavy emphasis on the way virtues affect leadership, which is important, and the Transcendentals. But it also goes through just some practical tips that as a leader, see, if you're going to lead and you're going to truly lead, you have to understand leadership. And uh, a leader who leads small people in a small way to be small and accomplish small things, you can never call him a great leader. I mean, if you look at it, name a great leader. You're going to say George Washington. You know, it's going to be somebody that just knocked things down. St. Peter, you're going to just see that sort of thing. Now, there are intellectual leaders like St. Thomas Aquinas, whose work has just, echoed through, the centuries. But, he wasn't known as a leader. He was known as a theologian, somebody
Right.
who's teaching, right, and providing. But a leader, if you think about this, people don't know leadership. They say, well, if you ask them, what is a leader? They say things like, well, somebody who's not a hypocrite, somebody who leads by example. But those are nice things in a leader. But ultimately speaking, a leader is a person who takes you where you need and want to go. And if you're going to really do that, you have to look at people and say, well, who do you want to be? Almost anybody you talk to says, I want to make a difference. I want to be all I can be. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to maximize and reach my potential. People don't say, I want to be an average, quiet person. Even if they say, listen, I don't need a lot of money. Okay. Like my second grade teacher. If I were to say to my second grade teacher, do you want to be an average, okay, or bad teacher? She'd be like, no. I want to be a great teacher, because any teacher who knows what it means to teach is that who's the who is the victim or the beneficiary of that person's quality and skill, the person they're taking care of. I mean, you walk up to you want LASIK surgery. You any good at this? No, not really. Okay, well, I'm not going to get it done there. You go up to a new accountant. You any good with math? No, it's not my thing. Okay, well, I'm not going there either. So, we go to people who are qualified to produce the positive outcome. Well, a leader needs to take you where you're going, but for the most part, they need to make sure that they're inspiring and bolstering and making you bigger. So people say, I like it here because I have an opportunity to grow. I like it here because it's united. I like it here because I'm challenged. People don't say things like wanting to be there, to be average or low performing or a liar or to get away with things unless they have had their personality entirely warped in a deficit position. And so leaders do that. They draw the best out in people. So I give strategies for that. And then if you're going to lead, well, there means in almost every circumstance, leadership is tied to some sort of organization, right? And so if you're going to lead within an organization, you need to be able to build the culture out right. You need to be able to attract talent. You need to be able to inspire that talent. And so I give some examples of how to get that done too.
And like you kind of say, it's not just the things that you share can and should be applied to everybody. It's not just about business, not just about being a business leader, but being a leader in life. You there's a few things in here I would love to. You've been talking about them this entire conversation, but I think like real quick, properly, maybe touching on the virtues and the transcendentals. I wanted to read a few quick quotes though, in relation to that. So you state here on one page, I recognized that both philosophy and the virtues were the most powerful catalysts to increase personal performance and sustain success. On another page, you're talking about the transcendentals then. That would be unity, truth, beauty, and goodness. And you say these ancient principles are timeless and instrumental to the modern context of building, scaling, and leading a business. All organizations flourish only to the degree that they have transcendental qualities. Um, and then finally, you state sort of the question: how do the cardinal virtues and the transcendental desires empower you to answer the four essential organizational questions? For what purpose was this thing made? What priorities should we focus on? How will we go about it? And what will we do to stay on track? So I read those quotes because they do lay out the fruit of it, basically. But I'm wondering, for anyone who may not know, I think in this instance, it might be good sort of to focus on the workplace when you, for a context when you're talking about these. But could you go through the four virtues and then those four transcendentals proper?
Sure. So the virtues are prudence, which is the mastery of decision making, really. Okay. It was also called wisdom. And there are three components to this. Now, there's Aristotelian titles for these, okay? But Joseph Pieper, who was one of the greatest, philosophers of recent history, wrote essays on each one of them and then compiled them into a book. So it's the cardinal virtues, and he basically breaks it down that there are three steps to prudence in language that I think is easier to consume than the Aristotelian idea. But the first one is to desire what is good. That's a good way of looking at it. So when I help people, I'm like, do you desire what's good in your relationship? Do you desire what's good when you get behind the wheel? Do you desire what is good when you go to dinner? Do you desire what is good under any circumstances at all? At your job, entering into this podcast, do we desire what is good? Then do we know what is real? That's the judgment. That's what Aristotle or Aquinas would call judgment. Um, this is where most people fail. Like they don't know what's real. There are about 50 different biases that we all have. And the second most powerful motivator for human beings is self justification. I was just talking to my wife, and she was saying that she heard a story recently, and I remember she met somebody like this too. Um, their family, the wife and kids are leaving them because they have this online relationship with a new romance who is younger, and they keep sending this young woman all this money, and the young woman sends pictures back and even an occasional gift, and she definitely loves him. And forget the fact that he's never ever actually talked to her. Okay, never video conference. It takes no intellectual capacity whatsoever to know that this is a 435-pound Russian guy stealing his money.
Oh, Lord
Okay.
have mercy.
But the problem is this desire to have that love or that relationship is so intense. The self-justification is so massive that he's willing to lose his family for it. And so he doesn't know what's real. He also fails in desiring what is good. I mean, what is good is that he's faithful to his family. Interestingly enough, even things like that, the sin is like it's a warping of good, right? The good thing that he wants is to feel loved and fulfilled and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's out of order, so it doesn't work. So you have to desire what's real, you have to know, or you have to desire what's good, know what's real, and then you have to pursue what is good. That's the acting on it. There is no such thing as a prudent person who does not make decisions quickly when they have all the information and context. You're around a prudent person because, man, they can decide something super fast, but they always measure the speed of the decision to the weight of
Okay.
the
I
issue.
have to interrupt you, Dave,
And that's a
because I'm
super
feeling
important thing.
personally attacked.
Yeah.
I spent 5 minutes today trying to decide where to go for lunch.
No way. Did you know? Oh my gosh. You want to tell them this bad news of the analogy that I give all the time? So, Nick, I love that you said that. First of all, because anytime somebody is vulnerable about something like that, you know that they're probably not really steeped in it as much as they're kind of in a self deprecating way, making the show more interesting. That's what you're doing here. But if you like truly had that about you, you probably wouldn't be as willing to share it. But I give that example. I say the imprudent person is the person who takes 25. You're like, hey, it's a work day. We got to go grab some lunch. They take 25 minutes to decide where to go, and then when they get there, they take 25 minutes on the menu. But that same person who maybe not even be wealthy will just like spontaneously buy a car over the weekend, and you're like, what? So that type of thing is like we have to
Yeah.
measure these things
Yeah.
appropriately.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. You can continue. I just That's
No,
too funny.
absolutely. Then the second one is justice, and that's just teach their due portion. Now, as Catholics, I can tell you that really what justice is to give God his due portion, which is the whole portion. And that's really what justice comes down to. Like worship, religion itself is a manifestation of justice. But you can't really be just to God without being just to your neighbor. So even though that's like the highest iconic moment and true definition of actual justice, there's no way. It's kind of like a person who's like, "Oh, I love my wife and I love my kids." I mean, they're broke. I don't give them anything. I don't provide anything, but I do send money to Africa. Wait, what? No, that's not just. So if you're going to send money to kids in Africa, it has to be after you have money left over to take care of your family.
Yep.
Otherwise it's out of order. And then there's fortitude, which is courage, grit. There's a lot of ways of looking at it. By the way, each one of these has what would be considered like an integral virtue within it. So, for example, didn't I mess this up? Oh, I messed up on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
Circumspection. I said circumcision on relevant radio this morning. That was the wrong word. That's not what I was looking for. I don't know. We were talking about the Old Testament. Somehow it came up. Anyway, circumspection is like to basically to be able to see the circumstance you're in. It is to know how close you are to somebody else. Are you talking too close? Are you like standing in line and backing? Are you walking through the airport and you just stop and nobody can go? Right? It's like a bad driver blocking the fast lane. Okay, I think that might be a mortal sin. Well, anyway, if you ever ride with me, you know that I think it's a mortal sin. Anyway, so gosh, I just distracted myself. That's not a virtue. Distraction is not an integral virtue within a virtue. No, but circumspection also is like where you would know what is appropriate to talk about at that time and place. Like that's not something you talk around your kids. That's only a topic between you and your wife. And if we lose this, we can't actually have prudence because we don't desire what's good in the circumstance. We definitely know it's real and we're acting inappropriately. And then ultimately there's temperance. So if a person has all these things, but they can't resist a certain temptation, we've seen this, right? In you know, every tabloid story of politicians and actors and actresses that just fall down like dominoes, where they're working hard, they're doing certain things, they've got a lot of good things happening, but this temptation just knocked them right down and they couldn't stick with it, whether it's drugs or infidelity or whatever it might be. And so we need to have these things if we're going to actually be effective. Because here's the bottom line, Nick, when we're talking about leadership, no one wants to be around a bad decision making, unfair quitter who has no self control. And that would be the opposite of what it means to have the cardinal virtues. And the word cardinal, by the way, is a Latin term for hinge, meaning that all of the virtues hinge upon the cardinal virtues.
It makes me think, this is only slightly tangentially related, that I think it was Jordan Peterson once said, you could have the best, most successful athlete in the world, but if he's arrogant, like everything else good that he did falls apart.
Yeah, I used to love it whenever back in the day when Terrell Owens was playing. Do you remember Terrell Owens?
Mm-mm.
He was quite a football player. You remember Terrell? He was bigger than life, and he's always taking the microphone. And who else was it too that was doing this at the same time for the Vikings? A wide receiver. Oh gosh, why can't I remember his name? But I always loved it when those players were playing against my Green Bay Packers because I knew they'd never make it to the Super Bowl. A person that draws that much individual attention to themselves always muddles the culture. And because of the muddling of the culture, it doesn't, it messes things up.
So coming to a close,
Randy Moss, sorry. Randy Moss. You were looking, weren't you? Yeah, it was Randy Moss. Okay.
I think as we wrap up, is there any advice that you have for Catholic professionals who are looking to do all these things, to work, to lead, to live with the virtues, with the transcendentals, but with faith?
Yeah. So I didn't really get into the Transcendentals. I can wrap that into this question simultaneously. So they're universal desires. Everyone has them. And to me, they are probably the greatest proof of God. That's not why I actually put them in here. I put them in here because they're universal and you can harness everything with them. But the full extension of them is that we all seek beauty. Nobody ever says, I've had enough beauty. Please give me ugly now. Okay. And when we are in the midst of beauty, it moves us. Okay. And all of them are related. All of them actually make a presumption of the other to a certain degree, which is why a young man sees a beautiful woman and he thinks, he gets older, he starts to learn, by the way. But a young man sees a beautiful woman, he thinks goodness, truth, beauty, and unity. And then all of a sudden, he knows what it's like to be around actual teenage girl.
Yep.
And he realized that's not always lined up that way for all of them, right?
Right.
But nobody's ever said, I've had enough truth now, start lying to me. Although if people warp themselves in virtue, they want to be lied to and they lie to others. But that's not something that's a natural inclination. You have to really go down a road to perdition pretty far to want to be lied to. Nobody ever says, what I loved about that is it's such a divided environment, which is why, people who hate unity and hate goodness and beauty and truth pushed diversity in companies. It's like any idiot could figure out that that's going to divide every organization. And by the way, every study shows it. That's in my book too. I talk about the Harvard Business Review and the studies that are in there. And there's just so many studies that show diversity doesn't help. So when you're Mark Cuban and you go, diversity is our secret, all you know, that dude's, he's placating. He is when he says that sort of thing, he is demonstrating what would be considered a situational or a subjective virtue, because the dude's got a ton of virtue. Can't deny that, right? You can't build a big business like he had and not, like most of what I hear him say, I say smart, and that's good, and it's hardworking, and it's effective, and it's just like many, many good things. And then I start hearing him talking on things, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what he's doing right here. He's either self-justifying or he is a coward. So right here in this circumstance, he can't stand up to what he knows is true. Because, by the way, no leader believes that if you bring that stupid stuff into your company, it's going to unite people. No one believes that. Okay. And that doesn't, the more they try to tell you they believe it, the more you know they are lying to themselves, and they have to lie to themselves to believe it, because it's a self-apparent thing. So what happens is, if we're going to build a great culture within an organization, we need to make a beautiful, a good, a true, and a beautiful, and a united culture. Now, there's more to the Transcendentals. The big ones are goodness, truth, and beauty. But unity is a part of it, and then love and home are also two things that people say are universal desires. Now, why do we have these universal desires? It's like, how is a car today better than a car 100 years ago? Yeah. Is a car, 10 years from now, going to be better than cars today? Yes. Name that. All of those things. When you've had the best burger you've ever had, you look for another great burger. Oh, I had the best burger I've ever had. There's a better one. Really? A better one? I want it. We always want to push that as far as we can. Well, why? Because if we universally desire perfect beauty, because that's what we're going for, we have an unquenchable appetite for perfect beauty. And you can't possibly have an appetite without a stomach,
Right.
which means you can't have a desire for something that you cannot ultimately not consume, but partake in, right? That's the beatific vision. But then there's truth too. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the beatific vision in the full Godhead, right? And then we have unity. He's united. And that's why he made the family to be united. That's why we just desire united things. And the Holy Trinity is perfectly united. And then the one that people forget is goodness. They don't know how to define it. But think about this theologically. Only God is good. Okay? Now, God makes the world, and as soon as he does this, it is good. Right? Why did he say it is good? What is goodness? Goodness is the thing that is made by the Creator being in its full manifestation the way it is supposed to be. So the world was good as God made it, until things about it became warped later on. Only God is good because God is complete. So that was the language that was being used. Now, if I pick up my shoe and I throw it at you on the screen in front of me, no one would say that is good. That is bad because my shoe is not for that. But if I walk along in my shoes, they say, well, that was good. If we have a meeting to balance the budget and we don't balance the budget, we just talk about football, nobody's going to say it was a good meeting. But if we balance the budget, say it's a good meeting. But it could be more beautiful. Okay. So if you think about that, that's corporate culture, that's family culture. And that is also very good for a man who wants to go out and accomplish great things in his own life, or any young professional, man or woman, is to say, first of all, I have to harness these virtues. But second of all, I have to deepen my desire for what's good, true, united, and beautiful. Because if I don't, I'm literally going to build an appetite for ugly. And we see it. When people get steeped in sin and you look at the way they dress and you look at what they listen to and the way they talk, it's ugly as sin. And so they start to acquire an appetite for what is ugly. And so that's why I tell people you need to acquire an appetite for what is good, true, beautiful, and united. And that's why they acquire an appetite for division, which is why they sow division constantly in the workplace, right? With all these DEI things. So it's just super important for people to recognize that the intentional fueling of the transcendental desires capped on top of or working simultaneously with an intentionality with the cardinal virtues is very powerful.
Very well said. And just in regards to goodness, I think most people not knowing that they are good is, when I look at anybody advocating, I'll just say, like, for the culture of death. I've had debates with people where they're advocating for abortion or something, and they'll say statements like, "Well, if my mother wanted to abort me, then she should have." And I'm like, "You're standing in front of me. Don't you know you're good? Like, you're good."
Yeah. Well, I think at that moment, Nick, they might know, and this isn't to be contrarian at all, but they might know they're not good.
Hmm.
And by that, I mean when a when a person now they have human dignity and they have value and they have an eternal soul, but goodness is when something created fulfills the use of its creator. And if that person is lying, cheating, sleeping around, doing all sorts of things that are not good, they know right now they're not good. And when people go, I'm a good person, and they're doing all that, no, you're not. You're 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 not a good person, actually. You need to why did well done, what and faithful servant? Well done, good and faithful servant. Why? Because that servant did the thing to get that reward. What did he do to the other servant? He didn't call him good, he called him evil, and he cast him out. So it is important. So a lot of times people recognize that what they're doing in their own life does not merit the term good, and they're struggling with it. Now, of course, on this top, now, by the way, this is a prudential thing, right? Where uh, you have the ability to understand a circumstance, to do what is right in the right way, for the right reason at the right timing. There's no way I would say that it's a person who's going through that sort of thing at that time. That is the time to say, hey, listen, you know what? Human beings were made to be good, and you need to understand your value.
Yeah.
I would definitely support it that
Yeah.
way to be a but it's interesting to note how we can pull out two lessons about the virtues, um, prudence in that conversation, how you had it the right way, by the way, very effectively.
Hmm.
But at the same time, how we can really understand goodness at a different level, and it brings a completely different look at it. So I tell people, if your meeting was good, could you have made it more beautiful? And the answer is always yes.
Hmm.
That's going to be a better meeting.
Hmm.
They'll both be good, but one will be better.
Hmm.
And that's an
Hmm.
interesting thing.
So now closing this, if Catholic professionals want to integrate this into themselves, into their workplace, does it mean, obviously it can be separated from the faith to a degree, but should it be for Catholic professionals who want to bring these into the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, like this is a secular book. I didn't write this for a Catholic audience. And by the way, just not incidentally, the cardinal virtues were before Jesus. I mean, you talk about Aristotle. or Plato or Socrates talking about virtue, they weren't Christians. Jesus was never born at this point right there. They were either, polytheists, although I think Socrates was really more of a monotheist and he died as a result of this. But, these are things that their culture wasn't even that. They just understood human nature, right? And then when you think about, the Transcendentals, I don't have to walk up to anybody other than a human being to say, "Is this more beautiful than this?" And then for them to go, "Well, that's more beautiful than that." Well, then do you like this more than that? Yes, I do. Universal desire. Okay. So what's so cool about this though is like, as Catholics, we're saying to himself, "This sounds Catholic." Well, that is what I call the Catholic advantage
Mm,
because that's actually not Catholic. But the very idea that a Catholic can recognize this as a Catholic principle is awesome. I mean, it's honesty. People go, "Well, that sounds like a Catholic talk." Really? Okay, like, you know, I want everybody in my life to be honest with me, Catholic or not.
yeah.
And pretty much I know, unless somebody's been warped, they want that too. So it's universal, and that's what I love about these things. So yeah, they're very applicable to anybody, no matter what they're doing. And I think you're wise in the workplace too, not to go out. Hey, I have some Catholic principles I'd like to share
Yeah.
with you right now. Even though, by the way, the gifts of the Holy Spirit almost sound like a self-help workshop.
Yeah.
You know, that outside of maybe fear of the Lord and piety, they really all sound like. Wouldn't you want everybody in your company to have those things?
Yeah, and it's probably just an opportunity if someone, a coworker, comes up to you and they're kind of recognizing these things and you can use it then as an opportunity to evangelize.
Oh, it's a huge one, and
Yeah.
people recognize it like you wouldn't believe. They are drawn to it, and the people who are mostly drawn to it that I see are the people who want to be drawn to it, who may be nominal in their faith, but they're attracted to something there that says there is something more there that you could give me, and I want that. Here's another little tiny little thing, Nick. We didn't talk about it, but make sure that you are in shape, you stay in shape, and you are strong. The reason for that is not even really about that. Um, Study after study after first of all, we know that our body is a temple, so we should take that seriously. Okay, but if a person wants to be influential, when you have a person that is out of shape and sick, okay, like you look at them and you're like, immediately without having to do any math at all, there's something inside the human psyche. Now, by the way, this isn't me judging. This is all the studies. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a study. It's common sense. Even people in the circumstance. I've been there myself, by the way. Okay, I know what it's like. I had to lose like 40 pounds at one point in my life. So, but you look at the person, and I knew it about myself at the time, and you say that person lacks something. They lack discipline. There's a virtue in their life. They're lacking some sort of self-control or order, or maybe they have it, but they're so intensely stressed by things happening in their life that I don't know what it is, but I sense something, not to mention the fact that I sense disease in there. And there is disease when we're overweight like that. When you see a person that is in shape, you ought to, and by the way, I'm not talking about things that tragically happen to somebody or a thyroid thing. I'm not talking about things people can make no judgment of at all.
Hmm.
Those things, anybody that goes through deserves compassion and empathy. End of story. But the self inflicted things that we can make a change on, that when people see in us, it says this, that guy can provide something to me. He can protect me and he has something of value that he can share with me. And I kind of know it intuitively like the Transcendentals. And there's something about that. Now, I think it's a mistake for us to take this too far, and all of a sudden, some of these things have to have the California beach body, or that it's about winning some sort of physical fitness contest, or super machoism and all this kind of stuff that would become silly and ridiculous. But it's about just making sure from a reasonable perspective, you've optimized your health so you have the energy to enter into the circumstance.
Right.
I mean, you would never say to somebody, go get drunk and then have a debate, right? But like
Right.
we get drunk on carbohydrates, we lack sleep, we have depriments in so many different things, and then we were going to go process things and think. We're going to go be good and virtuous with our family when we're super exhausted, super stressed, and all we did was feed our body things that we shouldn't have had. No, I mean that's not a prudent decision. So it comes back to these things too.
50%. This is like if I have one thing in life that I'm that I'm struggling in, it's I always think of 50% of holiness is going to bed on time.
Oh yeah, how about it? Yeah.
Um, okay, so this has all been incredible. If anyone listening says, I want more of this, where can they go for you specifically? And this might be with your program. If say whatever you'd like about it, to any length. But where can they go to learn more and learn more from you?
Well, I think if they want to go specifically to that, they could just email me at dave@leadinggiants.com. Doesn't mean that I'm personally going to get back to them. I would like to, but they can ask for more, and then we can help them with whatever direction they're in. But they can go to my podcast too, on YouTube, Durand on Demand. We share a lot of information like this, but we're actually, you know what, Nick, I'm not sure when this podcast is going to be aired, but we're building. I know this sounds like a bold statement, but I'm going to say it. What I believe is the most powerful program for optimizing personality ever built. It
Wow.
is the most powerful tool to make you the best version of yourself and to reach your full potential, which means, by the way, optimizing your personality ever built. And it's going to be coming out in the next couple of months. And so, depending on when this airs, they might be able to look that up, and you can put a little note under there, and we'll have them go to it. It's funny. I usually don't build or do things that I don't believe are going to help. In fact, not usually. I don't. I only write things that I think are going to help people. I had a confession book that just came out, 100,000 copies in the first 4 months, and it was a non-for-profit circumstance for me. In fact, I was a loss leader, but that's because I want people to go to confession because I know what it's done for me. But anyway, the point would be on this personalization app, because it is 35 years worth of work coming together in one place in such a usable form. You know how I said I don't like selling before? I'll talk about this anywhere with anyone, because it's just going to help people. So I appreciate you asking. Normally at the end of the show, I go, nah, Nick, I'm fine, whatever. And now whenever I'm on a show and somebody asks me, I'm like, oh, you got to get it. You got to get this app. It's going to change your life. So that's why.
Now, can you say a name or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay. Well, it will eventually be linked. So,
It will, and
and
well, it may
I
have
pers
something to do with
I'll
our name right here.
okay. Noted.
Yep.
There's so many things, Dave, I've thought of that I hope to speak with you about in the future because your story, we barely scraped it. The things that you've been through, that you've risen through, and yeah, the success you've had, but it is, I think this entire conversation proves it's more than a worldly success, and I'm grateful to you for sharing it, like in this book, in this conversation, just in knowing you. So I'm grateful for your time and for this talk.
Well, I appreciate that, Nick. I'm really proud of you. Keep doing the good work. You're going to be off to a great start. And pints with who?
Your words, not mine.
All right.
Thank you so much. As always, I want to thank you for your time and for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Sharing is so important. If you can share this with friends and family, just so more people can hear the fruit of a conversation like this, from an incredible guest like Dave. And also, if you're able to, and if you feel called to, any support you can provide so that I can continue to make content like this is deeply appreciated. Thanks so much. God bless.